Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. I am your host, Lillymu961, and I hope you guys are having an excellent day so far. Today, we will be tackling the fourth installment of Alyson Noël's Immortals series, entitled Dark Flame. To my wonderful audience, if you have not seen the 3 previous reviews, you may want to check those out or read the series I am discussing before continuing on. This review will contain massive spoilers for the first 3 books. Dark Flame begins shortly after the events of Shadowland, in which Ever is forced to make her best friend, Haven, into an immortal. While Haven is excited for the prospects immortality can bring, Ever is worried about her friend primarily because she is dating her arch-nemesis, Roman, who also happens to be the guy who poisoned Haven and nearly caused her death in the first place, but whatever. In the wake of this massive change, Ever is dealing with the after effects of a spell gone wrong, and no matter how hard she tries to resist its pull, she finds herself falling deeper and deeper into madness. Before long, her life is falling apart, again, and all of Ever's carefully kept secrets are coming out one after another. Will Ever overcome these challenges and get the antidote she seeks from Roman, or will she end up succumbing to the dark flame within? If you guys have been following these reviews since the beginning, then you know that I typically like to begin with a plot summary for whatever book I am reviewing before moving forward with the actual review, which is usually a list of things I liked and disliked about the book. The normal format of my reviews are crafted around the idea of entertaining an audience rather than providing critical commentary, and most of my complaints for the previous books have been of a nitpicky nature. Rather than a review, the past 3 videos regarding Evermore, Blue Moon, and Shadowland have been more or less my reaction and feelings toward those books after reading them for the second time. Dark Flame, however, is a different matter entirely. I cannot adequately express my rage for this book without spoiling it in its entirety, because I have genuine problems with this story and the series at this particular point that go deeper than just being nitpicky. In light of this, my spoiler-free version of the review is as follows. To summarize all this in a couple of sentences, Dark Flame takes everything good about the first 3 books and systematically tosses it into the garbage. How it happened is a mystery that I can't really fathom, and it almost feels like it was planned to be an unpleasant experience. If Shadowland represents the beginning of the fall, Dark Flame represents rock bottom. Most of the main cast have transformed into complete idiots, and characters that were already working my last nerve have somehow gotten even worse. And to top it all off, the one character that's somewhat interesting is callously tossed aside, all for the sake of creating a plot for another book in a series that should have wrapped itself up in a neat bow long before now, but didn't. Don't read this book. Don't read this book. Please, for the love of God, unless you just really want to torture yourself and scream at the pages every 15 minutes, do not read this book. Although, if you do manage to make it through Dark Flame, Night Star, the 5th book in this series, will reward you for it. But we're not there yet. And because we're not there yet, there's only one thing for me to do. Tear this book apart piece by miserable piece. From this point forward, I am going to spoil the entirety of Dark Flame. This book is unique in that it is both important to future themes of the narrative, yet pointless in that you only really need to know the plot summary and the major spoilers in order to read the next book. In my review of Night Star, I will get into a theory about the role I think Alyson Noël intended for this book to play, and how its inclusion in the series plays beautifully into Ever's character development, symbolically speaking. For now, though, we're going to discuss the vast array of things that are just wrong about Dark Flame and the entire series up to this point, because now is the perfect time to do so. Please understand that the harsh nature of this particular review is not meant to offend those who enjoy the book or to disrespect the author. Regardless of whether you enjoy her work or not, Alyson Noël has a wonderful ability to make you feel with her books. I may despise Dark Flame, but I still read through the whole thing within a very short amount of time because I wanted to know whether things would get better for the characters involved. This series is a roller coaster ride of feels, and I am absolutely loving it. Dark Flame just happens to be that one book that I just find grating and just unpleasant, For reasons I will explain briefly, but I can't do that without giving spoilers, so just hang in there with me, people, okay?
2 hours later.
Now, where to begin? I suppose the best place to start is at the point where things started to go wrong. In the last review, I made a statement about Shadowland being the beginning of the series' downfall. Truth be told, though, the real beginning of the fall was the first chapter of Blue Moon. Not because the rest of the book descended into being a horrible mess, but because it sets up what will eventually be Dark Flame. In the first chapter of Blue Moon, Ever was uncomfortable with the idea of being physically intimate with Damon. In Evermore, he told her he would never push her into something she wasn't ready for. Well, on page 3 of Blue Moon, he says, "Ever, I'm not trying to rush you or anything. Really, I'm not. But at some point, you're going to have to get over this and accept who I am." Using these words, Damon guilt trips Ever into thinking she should just get over the fact that not only did he stalk her past incarnations over a period of 400 years, but that he did so while married to another woman who she was forced to kill to protect herself. He's asking her to just get over the fact that he selfishly forced her back to life and granted her immortality without bothering to help her family, then left her alone for months while she dealt with psychic powers she couldn't control. That's a lot for her to just get over, especially in the span of a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, Ever falls for this tactic and convinces herself that sleeping with Damon is the only way to move forward in their relationship. So, at the end of Blue Moon, when Ever accidentally places a curse on Damon, thanks to Roman's meddling in their lives, it produces a major problem for her. This curse that she accidentally put on Damon prohibits the exchange of DNA. As stated in the Shadowland review, if Ever holds Damon's hand for too long, he'll die. If the two of them kiss for too long, Damon will die. Any sexual activity between them whatsoever equals instantaneous death for Damon. Since Ever now has it in her head that sleeping with Damon is the only way she can progress in her relationship with him, she spends the vast majority of Shadowland trying to figure out how to get Roman to give her an antidote to the curse without any help from Damon. He also informs her that when he brought her back to life, he condemned her soul, which she shrugs off and even blames herself for to a degree. Damon then forces a temporary breakup between them when Jude comes along, not because Ever has shown any degree of interest toward the guy, but because he's in a pity party mood and feels like he's interfered in her life way too much. Of course, this realization has come far too late because Ever is emotionally dependent on Damon at this point. Her entire self-worth is determined by how he feels about her. So she throws herself into magic as a means to figure out how to get the antidote she wants from Roman so she can sleep with Damon. This plot thread is a really big problem. Why? Because this story began as a look into the life of a grieving teenage girl who gained psychic powers after a tragic accident that took the lives of her entire family. This story began with Ever being able to talk to her sister despite the fact that she was dead and about the bond they were able to share. This story began with a theme about overcoming grief, anger, and what it takes to not only forgive others, but yourself. Evermore was able to convey how destructive desperation and hatred are. It was able to present a believable protagonist the audience could get behind and relate to. And even though the romance was cheesy, it was still somewhat believable. By the end of Shadowland, the narrative has been severely damaged and undercut by the inclusion of what I like to call sex is the ultimate happiness plotline, because it's difficult to take it seriously. And not only is it difficult to take it seriously, but it just feels so out of place. Dark Flame makes this worse by adding an additional obstacle for Ever to overcome, and this obstacle creates unnecessary drama to the point where reading this book became one of the most unpleasant experiences I have ever had the misfortune of taking part of. So far, this has been the worst book of the reread for me. I am typically a forgiving consumer. If you give me good characters and an engaging story, I'm pretty much okay. Like, I'm not that critical. And I am able to overlook a lot of problems that a piece of media might have, whether it be books or film or anything else. I have enjoyed going through the majority of this series again, but Dark Flame brought all the faults in this series to light. There was no way to ignore it or forgive it. I can only stare at this book and think, I wasted my time. Throughout the story of the fourth book, this concept of a dismantled thing will remain at the back of your mind because this book chooses to focus primarily on the sex is the ultimate happiness plotline, while sprinkling in a conflict that's downright awkward to sit through. And the worst part is that the abandonment of the elements and character relatability that made Evermore and Blue Moon stand out has removed the potential for Dark Flame to have any impact whatsoever, especially once you take in its other problems. Okay guys, let's get one of the worst things out of the way. If you've been following this review series since the beginning, then you know that I don't like Haven that much. However, the reason I didn't like Haven in the previous books were mainly because she just annoyed me. However, annoying or not, I didn't want anything bad to happen to her. Because she's Ever's best friend, and Ever's the main character, and I like Ever, and Ever cares about Haven, so, I want Haven, to at least be safe, Don't want anything bad to happen to her. By the beginning of Dark Flame, well, I start to feel like a terrible person because, well... Oh, Ever, why didn't you just let this girl die? Why? Okay. To explain this, let's just dive into the book. In the very first chapter, after Ever tells Haven that she has been transformed into an immortal and apologizes for basically repeating what Damon did when he revived Ever, Haven says this. You're actually apologizing when I'm just so totally gobsmacked I can't even imagine how I'll ever repay you? Side note, you kind of have to deal with Haven's really dated slang, but that's not the problem here. Look, the main problem is what she's about to say. 2 pages later, she says this. Everything is so serious with you, Ever. Every single thing you say and do is just so dang serious. 2 pages after that, when Ever is telling Haven about how immortals don't really eat, a serious drawback of immortality that no one should be happy about, Haven will need to keep up appearances and at least pretend to eat. So she's telling her about all that, right? To this, Haven says, oh, like you? She looks at me, brow arched, lip curled into a smirk. You know how you just sit there at lunch, tearing your sandwich to shreds and crumbling your potato chips into little bits and thinking no one notices? Is that what you've been doing all this time? Keeping up appearances? 'Cause Miles and I just thought you had an eating disorder. Oh my God. Oh my God. Really? Really? Haven! Are you kidding me? If you really thought that, Haven and Miles, yeah, Miles, you're not getting away with this either. If you two thought about this, why didn't you, I don't know, say something? Or at least bring it up to Ever at some point. You're supposed to be her best friends. Shouldn't you have at least asked her, hey, we noticed you haven't been eating much lately. Everything okay? Like, you don't have to make a big scene about it or anything, but if you suspect something might be seriously wrong, you should at least casually ask that person how they're doing. Be giving of your time. Lend a listening ear. Not assume that they have an eating disorder and laugh about it behind their back. Like, are you kidding me? You're supposed to be her best friend, Haven. I'm gonna choke you, Happa. I'm gonna choke you. Whoo!
Hi, Jungkook here. It looks like Lily is having some technical difficulties.
Oh Lord, just have mercy on my soul. Have mercy on my soul. Why? Why have I done this to myself?
Okay, more like emotional difficulties.
Little by little, my soul is just wasting away. That's what's happening here.
Anyway, please stand by. Lily will return once she has calmed down. This might take a while.
Stay with me. It Again, if you choose to read this, this is the crap you're going to have to deal with in just the first 2 chapters. Just the first 2. On page 11, Haven is still giving Ever a hard time for not acting excited for her newfound immortality, which just a few pages back she was thanking Ever for. So Ever tries to tell Haven that being an immortal isn't all fun and games, and Haven replies with, yeah, there are rules, a downside, roger that, loud and clear, but geez, don't you ever just get tired of it? Of being so burdened, so weighted down by the world? It's like you have the best life ever. You're blonde, you're blue-eyed, tall, fit, gifted. Oh, and to top it all off, the sexiest guy on the planet just happens to be madly in love with you. I mean, let's face it, you've got the kind of life other people can only dream of. And yet, you make it look like the road to Suck City. And honestly, I'm sorry to say it, but I think that's crazy. Haven continues with her judgments of Ever for another couple of lines. Clearly, she doesn't understand why Ever wasn't excited about the prospect of immortality and why she's still down most of the time. So Ever has to explain this by saying, I guess because it all came at such a high price, the loss of my family. Ever continues, saying, it's just that I'll always be here. I'll never get to cross over and see my family again. And well, for me anyway, that feels like a pretty big penalty. The fact that Ever has to explain this to her best friend is really sad. Haven is already aware that the reason Ever moved to California in the first place was because of an accident where she was the only survivor. And while some of that grief was pushed to the side in the 3rd book, these lines still prove that the loss still affects Ever very strongly. Since Haven is supposed to be Ever's best friend, that much is something she should have already known and been empathetic towards. Like, seriously, woman, do you have a heart? And Haven's response to this reveal doesn't really redeem her. While she tones down the attitude, her dialogue later on in the story proves she really didn't care at all. Don't believe me? Oh, okay, you're asking for it. Here we go. On page 68, Ever makes another attempt to tell Haven that Roman is bad news after letting it go for a bit. Mind you, Ever had already told her that the guy basically almost murdered her, which Haven shrugs off because she's just that delusional, and then turns that back around on Ever like she's the villain of the story by saying, I wish I could believe you, but the thing is, I just can't. Because you're holding something back, Ever. I can feel it. And even though I have no idea what it is, one thing's pathetically clear. You're jealous. What this girl just say? Did she just say? Oh no. Oh, okay, hang on to your sanity, girl. Hang on to your sanity. Ooh. Proceed. Her lips curl when she adds, yep, believe it or not, Perfect Ever Bloom is jealous of me, Little Haven Turner. How's that for a change of events? You're used to being top dog around here. The smartest, the prettiest, the most perfect at everything, with the most perfect, smartest, sexiest boyfriend. Why do you keep saying that? And now that I'm immortal like you, it's just a matter of time until I catch up, until I'm perfect too. And the fact is, you can't stand it. Can't stand the thought of it. But the funny part, the ironic part is, in the end, you have only yourself to blame, since you're the one who made me this way. And even though you claim you'd make the same decision all over again, I can't help but think that you liked me better before. Back when I was a pathetic, little, attention-starved wannabe, the loser who ate too many cupcakes and made up stuff at anonymous meetings. I didn't mention this in my review of Evermore, but one of the things Ever reveals to us about Haven is that she is ignored at home by her parents. Because of this, she got into the habit of going to anonymous meetings for different issues that she didn't have. She would go to meetings for alcoholics, drug addicts, gambling addicts, overeaters, for hoarders, and a number of other major problems that Haven did not have herself. This was her way of getting attention from other people. Despite the fact that she has a younger brother who she seems to have a fairly good relationship with, and 2 friends who are happy to pay her all the attention she needs, Haven consistently went to anonymous meetings built for people with legitimately harmful issues, and made up stories about going through whatever addiction or life-destroying habit that week for the sake of gaining attention and sympathy. It's perfectly normal for teenagers who feel ignored to act out to gain attention. I can roll with that idea. What I can't roll with is the idea that Haven is ignored to the point where she has to get attention from people who are trying to piece their lives back together, gaining a false sense of belonging by crafting a sob story for those poor people to latch onto so that they'll empathize with her and understand her without realizing that they are being lied to. There is a difference between changing your style or behaving differently to gain attention and pretending to be a heroin addict to get attention from actual heroin addicts. This is I'm crying for help type of behavior, and I could sympathize with Haven if I felt there was something she was really crying out for, but it's obvious she was getting attention and love from her brother and from her friends. And in Shadowland, she even had a boyfriend who was doting on her hand and foot, who she broke up with because he made an attempt to help her feel better. Granted, his attempt resulted in a boneheaded decision, but it didn't warrant a full-on breakup in my opinion. Plus, it's obvious the real reason she broke up with him is because she wanted to date Roman. But I digress. Haven, you are a pathetic attention-starved wannabe. That doesn't change because you feel full of yourself, okay? Oh, and before I forget, Haven is also under the delusion that Roman wouldn't have let her die at the end of the last book. He has convinced her, easily I might add, that he would have saved her at the last moment if ever chose not to. Haven, let me make this perfectly clear. You are going to die. This isn't an anime where we can gather 7 Dragon Balls and wish you back to life, okay? Your best friend made the choice to do the only thing she could do to save your life because she cared about you and didn't want you to become a victim of Roman's revenge scheme. Even though Damon and Ava were both telling her to let your ungrateful behind die, Ever wasn't about to do that. Why? Because she's an actual human being who has the capacity to love people. The only thing that Ever is not telling you is that by saving you, she also condemned your soul. The only reason she hasn't told you this is because she feels guilty about it, and to make up for that guilt, she is trying really, really hard to protect you from Roman. Meanwhile, Haven, you don't even love yourself. That much is clear from the way you talk about yourself while saying what you really think about Ever. For some odd reason, she is perfect in your mind, and you are the jealous one, not her. I'm going to be perfectly honest, this author did a really great job creating this monster of a character, and I sincerely mean that. The foulness of Haven is truly, truly awe-inspiring. If Alyson Noël intended for the audience to hate Haven, she did a fantastic job. Like, the best job ever. And I have to give her props for it. There are few characters in media I hate more, and goodness, Alyson Noël, you did fantastic. Haven is a piece of work, okay? Ooh, cha. Moving on from the Haven madness, let's talk about Ever for a bit. In the previous installment of this series, the author establishes a plot point that could have been interesting, but ends up being painful to read through. On the night of Haven's near death, Ever cast a spell and accidentally bound herself to Roman, meaning that whenever she sees him now, she feels an overwhelming attraction to him. This is something that she keeps secret from Damon out of fear that he will immediately reject her, that he'll simply dump her because the spell she cast makes it impossible for her to control the underlying attraction she's had for Roman all along. So much could have been resolved sooner if the girl would have just told the truth from the start. Of course, it's no wonder why she feels like she can't say anything to Damon when a simple casual comment, a joke, is taken the wrong way by him. But I'll get to that later. The main idea here is that Ever puts all of her self-worth into what Damon thinks of her, and at this point, it is really starting to get on my last nerve, and I am going to go insane if I hear Ever say something else like, "Oh, I am not worthy of perfect Damon." Just shut up! Shut up! Ugh. Speaking of insanity, Ever's sudden paranoia of everything and everyone makes her do some really twisted not to mention dumb things. For one, I'm laughing because it's, oh my lord, this is one of the craziest things that happens in the book. And when I read this, I totally was just like, I can't even believe this happened. I can't even talk. It's that bad. So whatever does, she gets paranoid of Jude, and she decides she's going to take a knife and slice through his arm straight down to the bone. She takes a knife and slices through his arm straight down to the bone. I'm just gonna let that sit there, and I'm gonna let you guys ponder that for a second while I do some deep cleansing breath. Oh, and by the way, Jude doesn't press charges. Why? Because he's stupid too. And he's stupid because of the love triangle element that nobody wanted. Hey, Jude, when a psycho freaking stabs you, report them, you moron! Anyway, before this derails too much, the basic point is that Ever acts really ridiculous in this book. Her decision-making skills are flat out horrendous. Also, it's generally a problem when your main character narrates, "Apparently my throat chakra, the center of discernment, has always been a problem for me." Geez, I wonder why. Maybe it's because you stabbed a guy because you thought he was a rogue immortal despite having nothing to go on but circumstantial evidence. You also completely ignored Damon when he told you what the actual sign of a rogue immortal was, and just decided that the only way to prove Jude wasn't an immortal was to stab him because immortals have super fast healing, and you're just so certain that Jude is one, and so even if you cut him, he'll heal right away. Well, well, well. That didn't work out, now did it? Anyway, guys, we are not even close to being done with this review yet, but I figure you guys have other things that you want to do with your day, and we're almost at 30 minutes, so it's probably a good place to stop for now. However, I will be making a part 2 of this review, and there we'll continue with the ranting, and I'll also get to some of the good points about this book. There are a few, even though I've been going crazy this entire time. So if you want to watch that video, be sure to subscribe, turn on the notifications, and if you like this content from me, be sure to leave a like and comment below and share some of your thoughts about this book if you read it. I hope to see you guys soon. Ta-ta!
Is it safe to come out now? Okay, good. That was scary. Lily is normally so soft-spoken. Is this book really that bad?
2 hours later.
How the heck did she read this entire book and live to tell the tale? Be sure to like this video, guys. Lily suffered a lot. A whole lot. Okay, bye.